Hi, everybody, and welcome to Inspired by the Neighborhood, bringing Mr. Rogers' wisdom to life in your classroom. I'm so excited about this one. It's one of the most popular classes that I offer. People call and request this so often that I decided to put it in webinar form for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So, we all know Mr. Rogers and have probably seen some form or rerun or some sort of content that lets us know who Fred Rogers was. So you may share with me some time when you saw Mr. Rogers, heard Mr. Rogers, and yeah, you cried or you got a little teary or you got some feelings that came up that maybe you weren't expecting. So there was a time when Mr. Rogers speaking straight up made me cry. And we'll have an opportunity to do that at the end of the webinar together. So get ready to cry. No, but he in that speech that he shared, and he often does this with groups of people that he speaks with. But it's about 1 minute of silence. And when the first time that I heard about this, and I participated in one full minute of being silent and remembering the people who have loved and cared for me and who have influenced the way that I am today. Those memories and those people that came to my mind slowly at first, but then more and more came within that 1 minute. By the time the minute was over, honestly, about 20 seconds in, I was a little bit of a mess. So when we can pause, and so often we don't, we pause and we think about all the people who have come before us and who have lifted us and who have encouraged us to be the people that we are today. Especially around the work that you do to serve children and to serve families. I bet you there are many. And when we could pause and take a look at those, we'll see a few that come to mind right away. And then with that full minute, more and more and more people come to mind. And we realize that we didn't get here by ourselves, that there were other people who believed in us and who believed in the work that we do. So with that in mind, let's just take a deep breath. I've got my tissues handy, and I hope you do too. But let's go ahead and get to know a little bit more about Mr. Rogers. I'm Amy Williams from Amy Williams Academy, and I'm so happy that you're here today, carving out some time to learn more and to figure out how you can better show up to be the best person possible in the lives of children that you love. That's the mission and the vision that I have for the work that I do through Amy Williams Academy, and I'm feeling pretty honored that you're here with me today. So here's what we're going to talk about. Here's our agenda. So first, we're going to do a little bit of history. Then we're going to go into some age-appropriate practices. So if you work with infants, toddlers, if you work with primary age students, school age, and even older, what are those practices that we know and we utilize every single day? And what can we learn more about that through the work of Mr. Rogers and his work in the neighborhood? So with that in mind, we're going to go into learning a little bit of a new language. It's called Freddish. It's a thing. So we'll go through the steps of how we can take what we say day to day, sometimes over and over again throughout the day. How can we make that more like Fred Rogers? How could we be more respectful, more clear, more kind, more compassionate, more in a way that children could hear and understand, right? So we'll talk about Freddish, and you'll have that new language and that new skill going forward, right? After that, we'll talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and how the work that he created, the content he created, and the many, many children and families and other adults he inspired to be more considerate of the emotional intelligence of young children, the deep respect that we can have, and the more respect we can have for children being their own selves and with their own thoughts and their own ideas. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll go into some concepts for your classroom. We'll talk a little bit about advocacy, how you can stand up and support children. We'll talk about the letters, so many letters that were written to this person over the years and his responses to all of them. So directly from him, directly from a team that he had to create eventually with pretty clear present supervision from him to respond to those letters. Then we'll talk a little bit about the music from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So we'll have some time to, I'll invite you to pause this recording and go to your notes page and click on those links so you can hear some of the music, some music directly from him and from other artists who have covered his music. So might be something that you just want to listen to while you do the laundry or while you're doing something else, but to listen to and consider, how can I bring that into my classroom? How can I bring the music and the lyrics with that have so much power and depth and in its such simplicity? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll end with some fun facts that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know about Fred Rogers. And then at the very end, we'll have some time to pause and set a goal. What is it that you were inspired by the time listening to this webinar? What are you inspired to do? What's your goal? What's your action that you're going to take right away? Right. And then that'll be the end. So let's carry on. Okay, deep breath. So there are times when all of us, as we show up as important adults in the lives of children, where we say things that we think, oh, afterwards we go, well, did I say that out loud? I did, right? So there are from reflection and first noticing and then reflecting on, oh, what did I say and how did I say it? What was my body when I said that? How can I say that differently? How can I say that with more respect, with more kindness? And all of us, we're not going to be on our game all the time, right? We're human and we make mistakes. But the more and more we begin to notice what it is that we're saying and how we're saying it to children and to each other, we can begin to shift our language, and our language can shift um, our intent and our perspective and how we feel about things and how we could show up better and better every day for children. So you may have heard yourself say some things. I've said some things over the years that I look back and go, oh, I can't believe I said that out loud. Or how could I have said that better? Right? We're all in that constant revision of the way that we speak and we show up for children, right? So you may see some of these phrases and you may realize, oh, I said that, or some sort of variation of that. And what did you switch it to? How did you edit it? How did you flip that message? Right. So one that's common that I've heard many times over my years of classroom observations and coaching teachers and school leaders and families is, if you don't stop, I'm going to, right? Going to what, right? So we miss telling children what they can do and what our expectations are, right? But we could fall into that so easily. Now, many of these phrases are phrases that maybe you heard growing up, right? So the phrases that we hear growing up when we're little kids are often the phrases that come out of our mouth when we're either emotionally dysregulated ourselves, or maybe we're rushed, or maybe we're whatever place that we're in at that time. Sometimes things come out of our mouth and then we go, oh, did I say that? Did I say that out loud? Oh, was my face saying that out loud? Right? Okay, so here's another one. Oh, you're such a good boy or girl or listener or helper. You're such a good such and such. Now, that one can be kind of controversial because we think, okay, well, I want to give children uh, praise. I want to encourage what it is that they're doing. I want to say that behavior that you're doing, you're so good for that, right? Rather than being specific about what it is that they did. Wow, you used a lot of patience. You concentrated a long time on that. Wow, you were very patient with your friend in the line or helping your friend zip up their coat. So you can describe what it is that you see, right? If you've taken other classes from me, you've probably heard me talk about the difference between evaluative praise and descriptive praise. And you know, I love a good descriptive praise where you describe what is happening. And the child can build that internal voice that tells themselves, I am good. That was good. That felt great. I am strong. I am talented. I am beautiful. I am whatever, right? Rather than growing dependent on the opinions of other people. But I digress. Here, coming back, right? So here's another one. When we don't run in the classroom or in the hallway, this happened to me so many times. I worked with a school that had a very long hallway, and we don't run in the hallway was a rule, a guideline of the school. Cool. We all know that about that because it's dangerous. We don't want everybody to run like a pack of wolves or going down the hallway. So we walk in the hallway. Well, when the children run in the hallway and we respond with, oh, we don't run in the classroom or in the hallway, there's a moment when the child probably thinks, yeah, we do. Didn't you see me? Or I got new shoes, so I can really go fast. So I'm going to go fast, right? So when we say we don't run in the classroom when they just ran in the classroom, how can we say that better, right? Please walk in the classroom. Let's walk. Come walk with me, right? Something like that. Okay. Another one. I've asked you 3 times to put your backpack in the cubby. I've told you 5 times we're going out to recess right now, right? This is one that I've heard myself say sometimes in my head and sometimes out of my mouth, because sometimes we might feel frustrated because maybe we have said something 3 times or 5 times. So how can I say it differently so that they'll do what we hope they do, right? Okay, another one is, do I have to call your person, or do I have to call your mom or your dad or your grandma, right? Sometimes that can easily come across as a threat and can be disrespectful to the child and to your relationship with that child. So I'm going to have to call your person. I'm going to have to call your mom, right? Have any of you ever said that? Yeah. Maybe we really feel like it sometimes, and sometimes we do, right? Okay, so we've got some things that we say, and maybe we've said before that we'd like to rethink and revisit and see how can we say it differently, right? Okay, so with those in mind, kind of keep that in a little thought bubble on the side. Soon we're going to come back to a phrase that maybe you say frequently. Maybe it's one that's similar to the one on that list, or maybe it's something different. And we're going to take it through the steps to make it more Freddish. So that's coming up soon, right? So we did that just a second ago. To look at these is and to remind ourselves that we can show up differently. We can be aware and reflect on the way that we speak and the way that we say things to children, and be mindful of what impact does that have, and what can I do differently that has the impact that we want, right? Where the child feels empowered and feels like they can make a mistake and grow from that, where a child has an experience that you are on their team instead of being against them, right? Okay, so carrying on. Now, I'd love to first invite you to think about what is it that you know about Fred Rogers and the work that Fred Rogers has done through his television show and beyond. So we're going to pause a moment and write down what is it that you know already about Fred Rogers. And then a question that goes along with that is, what do you want from this time together today? So you've carved out time to turn on your computer, to get your notes page together, to be thoughtful and mindful and think about, what can I do differently? What can I learn? How can I grow? What is it that you want from our time together, right? So we'll pause for just a moment and find your pause button and just press that. And when you've written the answer to those questions of what do you want and what do you know about Mr. Rogers, push play again and we'll keep on going. And I'll be right here. Okay, now we're back. So here he is, right? From minister to icon. So maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know that Fred Rogers began as a minister in a church. He was a preacher. And in his what he started to notice about children's programming was that it wasn't so great. Right, so he saw cartoons back in the day, children's programming back in the day that had a lot of violence. We've all know about the Roadrunner, right? There's an anvil going to fall on somebody sometime, right? Or Tom and Jerry when they're in constant fighting with each other, or other, explosions and, he decided, I bet we could do that differently. We could do that better. Children deserve better. So, as a minister and with his background, he wasn't a child development specialist. So he knew I have some learning to do. So if I want to make an impact in the lives of children, I got to learn. I've got to find some mentors who can help guide me in this. So he found a few people that he worked with very closely as a mentor-mentee relationship throughout his career. So Margaret McFarland was one that had great influence. She was a child psychologist who really helped and refined and inspired his the way that he spoke, right? So there's all sorts of stories about the script when they were ready to the show to go on the air. At the very last minute, Fred Rogers was making edits to the script, right, to what he was going to say and what other characters on the show were going to say. And sometimes, if you've ever been in a in a performance kind of circumstance, either as a dancer, an actor, something like that, and things change right until the very minute, it can be really frustrating. But this was his dedication to make sure and continue to look again and again and again. Is this the most respectful? Is this the most clear? Is this the most kind, compassionate way that I could get this point across? I've got a short amount of time with children during this television show. I want to make every word count. And that mentality kind of came and was inspired by Margaret McFarland, helping him understand, what does a 3-year-old understand? What does a 4-year-old understand? How can we speak more clearly so that they can understand and feel respected and loved and cared for in this time that they are sitting in front of the TV, watching and listening to you? So another person who inspired Fred Rogers was Benjamin Spock, a pediatrician who helped him understand and learn about how children developed physiologically and what their language skills, how their language skills developed, how their social skills developed. So Spock was a pretty important influence on his work and his life as well, along with Erik Erikson, a psychologist that maybe you remember from your Psych 101 class. So, how can we speak more kindly? How can we treat children with more respect in my classroom, during this television show, and beyond, in the community, in the world? So, these influences had a great impact on the development of his work and the content that he created for children, right? So something that a little quote that I wanted to put in here is a student of Dr. McFarland, one of his greatest influences, described about her work was that she led children to the thresholds of their own minds. And that makes me think, that's really core to what it is that we do in the classroom with children, right? So there are times when we teach information, and that's great, wonderful. And there's so much power into leading children, guiding children to the thresholds of what they know and what they're curious about, and then getting out of the way. So we lead them to the threshold and then allow them to step through into what it is that they're interested in. What are they curious about? And how can we guide that with respect and a depth of respect that could grow deeper and deeper when we put our own consideration and reflection on how we approach things, right? Okay, I just want to add that little bit in there for you. Okay, now here's on the slide, you'll see a pendant that was created by an artist on Etsy, actually. So if you want to search and find it, it's adorable. And it's really, I think it's beautiful. But it says you can never go down the drain, Mr. Rogers. Now, why would I put this here? I put this here because Mr. Rogers, as we want to do as leaders of young children and guides of young children, is to not is to believe that every curiosity or every worry that children have is valid. So Mr. Rogers received a letter from a child who, in a nutshell, was worried about, didn't want to take a bath because they didn't want to go down the drain, right? So that's a worry that we as adults go, well, of course you're not going to go down the drain, right? Because our frontal lobe is all connected, and we could think logically, and we could see and understand there's no way I'm going to go down the drain. So Mr. Rogers approached this and clearly and with respect explained how you can never go down the drain. Matter of fact, without dismissing, oh, that's silly, or that's a word. Don't worry about that, right? But he gave information, which is so powerful, right? Information is power, right? So in helping children understand that their worries are valid, and here I can help you with either some information or reassurance that you can take a bath because you can never go down the drain, right? So we've all been in classrooms and in circumstances and in relationship with children where there is some sort of worry, or a child is curious or upset about something, and we may think with our adult brains that, okay, that's silly. There's no way, right? It's all right. You'll be fine. You'll be fine, right? When the child may feel, I'm not fine, right? So that when we dismiss that feeling of I'm not fine by saying everything's okay, don't worry about that, right? That is an opportunity that we miss where we could build our relationship and our trust with that child. And instead, when we say, it's okay, don't worry about it, that's impossible, you can never go down the drain, we can break down that trust, right? So let's take a pause and think about a time when you've been with children and there was a worry that they had, right? Maybe it was a worry that surprised you. Maybe they were worried that their parent was not going to come pick them up after school, or that they were going to be at school for forever and nobody was ever going to pick them up, or that they were going to fall into the toilet, or that, right? All of those worries that young children may have when they don't quite understand the whole context. We understand that context and they just don't know yet. So think about a time when you were working with a child and they had a worry that maybe surprised you. All right, so go ahead and hit pause. And when you're ready, when you finished writing, come on back. Okay, now we're back. This bit right here, the little sticker with the sweater, says love your neighbor, is a reminder for all of us to just take a breath, roll your shoulders, make sure your pencil's sharpened, refresh your beverage, and we'll come back. So take a deep breath and we'll carry on. Okay, so speaking about worries, that kind of made me think, worries and needs. We're trying to get our needs met as human beings, right? And I may feel worried or nervous or anxious when my needs are not getting met, right? So let's take a look at Maslow's work, right? Abraham Maslow and his team did lots of research and observation over a period of time and realized, there are, across cultures, there are basic set of human needs. So they created this, and often we see it in a pyramid kind of shape, the hierarchy of needs. And this is how Maslow saw it, right? Now his thoughts about this were influenced by the Blackfoot Nation that maybe we didn't hear about until later. I know I didn't hear about that influence until, honestly, just a handful of years ago. And it's important to look at how it was influenced by the indigenous community, the Blackfoot Nation, and they didn't get so much credit for it. And the Blackfoot Nation saw it in a little bit of a different way. So today we're going to look at both of them, right? Okay, so Maslow's hierarchy of need looks like this. We'll start here. And you'll see down at the bottom, physiological needs. As humans, we have needs for food and water and warmth and rest, right? As humans, I need to eat, I need to drink water, I need to be warm, and I need a place to, and I need my sleep and my rest. Now, the next one is the need for safety, the human need for safety. Am I emotionally safe? Am I intellectually secure? Am I safe here? Am I going to be hurt? Am I not going to be hurt? That's a basic human need we all have. Now, the next need is the need for love and belonging, the need for friendship and a sense of connection. Are the people around me going to love me even if I mess up? Are they going to stick around and not be, not crumble when I have a huge emotion? Are they going to love me no matter what, unconditionally? Do I have a sense of this is where I belong? Am I in a classroom? Am I in a home? Am I in a place where I have friends? And oh, okay, I'm supposed to be here. See, there's my name on the cubby. This is my classroom. There's a picture of my family on the shelf. This is where I belong. These are my friends. These are my teachers. This is where I belong, and I feel comfortable here. Next is the need for esteem. That's the need for respect, status, recognition. People see that I have skills, and there's a place for me to put my skills in action, whether it's I'm the best line leader, whether it's I can zip up coats, I can tie shoes, I can be kind, I can, right? And my friends and the people in my community recognize that. And I have a place to share and offer the skills that I have, right? I can contribute to my community. And then the next one at the top of this pyramid, as Maslow looks at it, is one of self-actualization. I can achieve my full potential when I have all of my needs met. I could be the most full expression of myself when I have more water and food and warmth and rest. I feel safe. I feel like I belong here. I'm loved and I'm respected. I can be the full expression of myself. I can be self-actualized. Okay, well, that's one way to look at it. Let's look at it in another way. And this is how so many people have interpreted, this is how the Blackfoot Nation looks at it in support and some things that are missing in the pyramid. You can see here in the circle. So check it out. Here's another way to look at it. So while Maslow saw that self-actualization was something that you had to earn by getting your needs met and earning your place in your community, the Blackfoot Nation saw it as something that was innate. We achieve that because we are human, right? We achieve that because we are connected in our community. So you'll see here in this circular way to look at it, physiological needs, yeah, sure enough. Need for safety, yeah. Sense of love and belonging, you know it. The need for esteem, I can contribute to my community, yep. Now look, aesthetics, music, and art is something that maybe you didn't see in the pyramid, but is seen as a basic human need. All humans need aesthetics, music, and art. As a dance movement therapist and expressive arts therapist, I love this one, and I believe in that 100%. Okay, moving on. Once you get all of these needs met, I can be the full expression of myself. I can be self-actualized. Now, it doesn't end here, right? So this in the circular configuration here, self-actualization leads to community actualization. So as an individual, when I can assist my community members for if they need water and I have water, I can share water. If I need water and they have water, they can share water. So we are connected in our community in helping each other get our needs met. And sometimes that might be helping each other learn to get our own needs met ourselves and our own sense of independence and our sense of interdependence, right? Love that. Okay, so when we're self-actualized, we can assist in our community rising together, our community actualizing and being the best version of itself as a community, right? Now that leads to, okay, as a community, we are the best that we could be so that we can be in service to the living world, right? What can I do to make sure the needs of my living world are being met, right? Because when I do that and my ecosystem is thriving, that nature around me is thriving, my physiological needs, our physiological needs are met. We feel safe, we feel loved, and we have a sense of belonging. You see, so it's circular, almost spiral, if you will. So going forward in your classroom, get this. If we can take a look at children's behavior and kind of break it down and get curious as to what is the unmet need here. Is it a need for a sense of belonging that isn't being met, and that's where the behavior goes sideways? Oh, do they have food in their belly, or do they have water to drink? The behavior is going sideways because that need isn't being met. So often, when behaviors are going sideways for our children in our community, and maybe even for ourselves, we can take a look at this and see, where do I have a need that's not being met? Am I struggling to get that need met? Do I have the skills necessary to get that need met or not? So that's where we, as the important adults in the lives of children, can be curious, lean into that curiosity of the unmet need, and what is the lagging skill, and then teach into that lagging skill, right? That's a little nod to Ross Greene and the idea of, unmet needs and lagging skills. So let's take a moment and pause and write. So you've got your notebook with you. So we're going to take a minute, find the pause button, hit the pause button, and here is the question. The question is, how have you seen a child in your community work really hard to get their needs met? And sometimes it could be that they're working hard in a way that is successful, and sometimes they work really hard in a way that's not so successful, right? And they may need us in that moment, in those moments at that time, to teach into that skill, right? To get their needs met in a way that doesn't hurt themselves or other people, that is helpful and kind to the community, right? You know what I'm talking about? So let's go ahead and pause and do some time for reflection. How have you seen a child work really hard to get their needs met? Was it successful? Was it not successful? Was it awkward? Was it more sophisticated? Right? So pause and write, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, we're back. So some age appropriate practices. We're shifting gears a little bit here. All right. So you'll see some of the things that we'll talk about right here on this slide that we probably know from our training and from our experiences in the classroom, right? But as a reminder, these are all important practices, yeah? And are there one or two, or maybe even more, where you think that you might go, I could do better here? My classroom team of adults, we together can do better here, right? So let's take a look at it. We'll start over here on this side. So first, let's consider when we're interacting with children, when we're leading our classroom, when we're guiding everyone, what is our word choice? Right? Are we considerate of the words that we use? Are we using too many words when a child is dysregulated, right? Because we remember, when they're dysregulated, the fewer words, the better, right? When you're dysregulated, you can't really process verbal information coming in, right? We know that. So let's consider our word choice. How much, how little, what are we saying? What is the speed in which we're speaking, right? Are we talking so fast that they can't process it, and so they miss really important chunks of information? And what is our delivery? Let's consider our delivery. What is the tone of our voice? Are we standing over the child, or are we down eye to eye with them, right? On their level. What is our delivery? Consider our word choice, consider our speed, consider our delivery. Now, also, let's consider our attention to detail. How much detail to give? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Right? So that's one that comes with time. I bet you would agree, right? With how much information, what is the detail of the information that we're getting? And is our language clear? Does it make sense? It's so easy to slip into adult language in the way that we can speak to other adults, where we might use sarcasm or slang or figures of speech that children don't quite understand what that means yet, right? And and that can be really telling and sometimes funny when children like they don't get what it is that we're saying. So, can we be more clear in the language that we use? Next, true and brief, right? This is a true and brief is something I learned years ago from a mentor of mine who was a Montessori trainer. And they spoke about the importance of being true and being brief, right? Sometimes we'll be brief so that children can pull from their experiences that they've already had and make sense about what's happening in the world. Makes sense about what's happening right here, right now, right? I want to be true and brief so that I'm giving information at a pace that they could receive, interpret, modulate, and make choices based on that, right? Okay. Next bit to consider is our tone. Be gentle and be present. Now, I want to say something about being gentle. Being gentle doesn't mean that we're a doormat, right? Being gentle means that we are clear and firm if necessary, as only as much as necessary, right? So being gentle doesn't mean not saying anything or by procrastinating or avoiding, right? Or using a tone of voice that doesn't match the intensity of what's happening, right? So if children are running into the street, we're going to say something really clear and firm and maybe loud at that moment to stop, right? If someone is hitting another person, we're going to say clearly and firmly, stop. I won't let you hit, right? And that's different than sometimes what's happening. I hear mostly with families, but gentle parenting. You've heard of gentle parenting. And sometimes that's misunderstood to be permissive parenting. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're gentle and kind, but we're also firm. We're clear and firm and respectful at the same time, right? Okay. That's what I wanted to say about that. There's so much more we can talk about that. Okay. And I'm a fan of gentle parenting, of gentle teaching, when it is done with great respect and clarity, according to the situation, right? More on that later. Okay, the next piece to remember is consider being present, right? Do some self-reflection and some self-noticing. Are you distracted? Am I fully present right here in this moment when this child or these children need me right here? Am I thinking about something else that's going on? Am I on my phone? Am I on a different device? Am I distracted by things that I know that I have to do? Now, it will happen that sometimes that is necessary, right? And we're humans, and we're adult humans that have responsibilities and a list of things to do. So it may be a work that we have to focus on to be present as much as possible. If we've got on our mind something that we have to do before the end of the day and we can't forget it, can we write that down and then come back to that later so that we can be present with this child, right? What are the things that you do to maintain your authentic presence when you're with children, right? Okay, another consideration is clarity and being concise. Say what you mean. We've already talked about true and brief, right? So we want to say what we mean in as few words as possible to get the point across, right? Okay. So it's another time to pause and write. So, of all of those age appropriate practice reminders, which one is a place of growth for you, for your teaching team? Right. So, this would be kind of an interesting something to take back to your co teacher or your lead teacher or your assistant teacher to talk about. Where can we grow? Where can we get better? I could pay more attention to detail. Hmm. I could be more present. Huh. I can notice my word choice or my speed of delivery, right? So take a moment to pause and write on which of these age appropriate practices are places where you'd like to grow. So go ahead and pause. And when you're ready, come on back. And I'll leave this up for you to look at. Okay. So you're probably back by now. Take a deep breath. And we'll keep on going. Okay, I'm so excited about this part. So this is Freddish. We're going to learn a little bit of a new language, y'all. It's a thing. Freddish is a thing. So I spoke earlier about the constant revisions and edits that he would make to the script before airtime of the show, and how some of his some of his colleagues were kind of annoyed sometimes about this, because what they were going to say when they went live in like a minute would change, right? The intent was to be as clear and all of those things that we've talked about as possible. And so he would constantly revise and change how to say whatever it is that he wanted to say, right? So he believed, and others around him believed, that it's important that we are mindful of that, because it supports the construction of the child's inner voice, right? So the idea that we speak to ourselves the way that we were spoken to by the important adults in our lives when we were kids, that's really powerful. So we can all think about, okay, what do I say to myself when I'm in high emotion or when I'm in a relaxed state, right? What are the phrases that I use to talk to myself? Or what do we hear ourselves saying to ourselves that we can connect with? I sound just like my mom, dad, second grade teacher, whoever it was that was an important adult with a lot of power. What did they say that we have absorbed and has created and become our inner voice as we get older? So when I think about that, I think about the power that we all have to help children create an inner voice that is kind to themselves, that is respectful to themselves, that's forgiving to themselves, that's loving to themselves. All those words that we would want to use to describe an inner voice that we all want to have. So, with that in mind, let's look at how we can speak to children in a way that when it becomes their inner voice, we could be okay with that, right? Okay, so now we're going to pause and write. So think about a phrase that you hear yourself say often, right? Whatever it might be. Okay, so I'll be quiet a minute, or you could just pause and write down that phrase that you say often. As we go through all the steps of Freddish, feel free to go back to that phrase and see how you can edit it through all there are 9 steps, the steps to make it more Freddish. All right. So find that phrase that you say often, or maybe it's one that you hear often from a colleague or from a family member to a child that you'd like to edit and play around with. Okay. So pause right here. What's that phrase that you say often? And when you're ready, come on back. Okay, now let's take that phrase through the steps. Here's Freddish 1. Exciting, right? Okay. So let's take this phrase through all the steps and see what we come up with toward the end. Okay. And the phrase is, it is dangerous to play in the street. Okay, that sounds okay. What's wrong with that, Amy? Okay, it can be improved upon, right? So Fred Rogers would say, okay, state the idea that you wish to express as clearly as possible and in terms that the children can understand. It is dangerous to play in the street. Got it. Now, how can we make that better? So if you were to pause and write, take a look at the phrase that you had, that you wrote down, and is it in terms that your children, your students can understand? So pause, give it a little edit, and then come on back. Okay, now we're back. Here's Freddish step 2, right? So Mr. Rogers would say, okay, now rephrase it in a positive manner, right? What is it that, how can you rephrase it in a way that's more positive and not negative? Okay, so it is good to play where it is safe. Okay, sounds pretty good, right? Freddish 2. So we're going to pause again, go back to your phrase, and make an edit to rephrase it in a positive manner, as positive as it could be. So pause, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, Freddish 3. This is where we can rephrase the idea. Remember, preschoolers, if for my preschool teachers out there, they're learning to make decisions and need to know who to go to for help, right? Not just preschoolers, but toddlers are learning this too. Preschoolers are really learning that in a condensed version in their preschool years. School age children and beyond are still learning that as well. How can I be resourceful? Who are the people? Who are my important adults that I could go to and I can trust, right? So here's how we can revise it again for Freddish step 3. Ask your parent where it is safe to play. If they don't know, where can they go and find out? Okay. So pause and write. Do a little editing. How can you rephrase it to add the resources that they could tap into when maybe they may not know? Okay, so pause, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, we're back. Freddish 4. Now we want to rephrase the idea to eliminate prescriptions or directions or instructions, like get rid of ask, right? So here's a declaration. Your parent will tell you where it is safe to play. Okay, this sounds fine, right? So we're good. Not quite. So let's take a pause and go back to your phrase and edit it one more time to make sure, do I have any prescriptions, directions, or instructions? How can I get rid of ask? Okay, so go ahead and do that. And when you're ready, come on back. Okay. Deep breath. Now, it could be, if you're taking this webinar, maybe you have several phrases that you're wanting to make more Freddish. So you could have 2 or 3 or 4 phrases that you're working through all of this editing process, working through all these editing process steps, right? So if you're doing that and you want to go back and add a couple more and take them through the steps, go right ahead. Otherwise, we're going to keep on going. Okay, so Freddish 5. So here's where we take that phrase and we rephrase any element that suggests any kind of certainty. Get rid of will. Something will happen, right? That helps us set us up for, what can happen instead of what will happen, because we're all humans and not everything happens in the way that we think it's going to happen, right? So we're going to rephrase any element of certainty. Get rid of the will. So here we go. Your parent can tell you where it is safe to play. It's okay. This sounds pretty good. I think we're there, Amy, right? Now, by this point, I bet some of you are noticing, I noticed something here that I really hope is going to change soon. Maybe you notice it, maybe not, but let's carry on and we'll find out. Okay, so your next edit is to take out any element that suggests certainty, getting rid of the will part. Okay, so pause, do this edit, and come on back when you're ready. Okay, Freddish 6. Now, we're going to rephrase this idea so that it can include all children. So those of you who noticed it, here it is. Here's that next edit. not all children have parents, right? So how can we rephrase it so that it includes all children? So your favorite grown-up can tell you where it is safe to play. You see how it's going through all of these steps? Now, remember, going through all of these steps is something that we're going to do internally, right? So making sure you understand that when we're talking to children about, where it's safe to play, that we're not repeating each phrase in the step, right? So the refinement of our phrase is something that we do the work on. And then we have the final phrase that we say out loud. Okay, makes sense? All right, so let's rephrase the idea so that it can include all children. Your favorite grown-up. Who is the favorite grown-up, right? Or can let them know who are you, ask the question, who are the grown-ups that you can count on, right? And I find an interesting conversation to have with children is about who are their people, who are their important adults. And you describe what is an important adult. An important adult is somebody that you can trust, who you can depend on, who can help you, who respects you, right? So you describe what an important adult is, and then ask the question, who are your important adults? Who are yours? Who are yours? What about yours, right? It's an opportunity to remind children who they could come to if they're upset or worried, or they have something important to share. It builds that, it deepens that trust that they have with you. And you can remind them that, oh, if you can't think of more than one or two important adults, I am an important adult for you. And, our co-teacher and our right. So I use that opportunity when I'm having this conversation with children to point out who in the school, who in the program, who in the neighborhood can children go to when they're looking for an adult that is important, that can be a grown-up who can help if they need help. Right. Okay, so that's a little aside. I have a lot of those. Okay, so time to pause and edit to make your phrase include all children. So take a pause and come back when you're ready. Okay, Fredish 7, we're getting there. So now it's time to add some motivation so that there's a reason to follow your advice, right? So we're getting there. So we've got our main phrase, right? So that main phrase sounds a little bit like your favorite grown-up can tell you where it is safe to play. Now, following up, some motivation. It is good to listen to your grown-ups. Okay, what do you think about that? So take your phrase and add a simple motivation that lets them know that there's reason to follow your advice. So we'll pause, add that revision, and come back when you're ready. Okay, Fredish 8, here we go. Okay, so this is the time where we're going to rephrase that statement. Again, repeating the first step. It is important to try to listen to your grown-ups. Remember, so we're taking out any kind of will, but we're adding try, right? It is important to try to listen to your grown-ups. So pause, make that edit, and come on back when you're ready. And now Fredish number 9. We've all been waiting for it. Now, this final piece is to relate it to some phase of child development that the child can understand, right? So rephrase that idea of final time, right? So, and listening is an important part of growing. You can play, and then tell them where they can play, where it is safe. You can play on the patio. You can play on the playground. You can play in the living room where it is safe. So you can play, you can climb, you can run, you can whatever, where it is safe. All right, so go ahead and pause and rewrite it, and you'll have your final Fredishized phrase. So pause and come back when you're ready. Okay, was that tedious? Yes, it was. And it's important to go through each of those steps so that when you have other phrases that you hear yourself saying, maybe it's phrases that you say a lot or phrase that just comes up naturally, you can go through quickly and say, okay, is it clear? Is it respectful? Have I eliminated any, direction? You can ask yourself all the fresh steps, and get to the final piece and feel all right, feel confident in the way that you're speaking and what you're saying to children. Okay. Now, if you haven't taken a break in a while, this is you've been here for a little bit. We've paused, you've written, you've come back, you've paused, right? So if you haven't taken a break to go to the bathroom, go get some water, reheat your tea, go pet your cat, do that right now. This can be kind of a long webinar. So give yourself a break and come on back when you're ready. Okay. Okay, now we're back from our break. Let's keep on going. Okay, now it's time to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, EI, right? So this is about forging relationships. So let's start with four different ways that we can be inspired by Fred Rogers in the way that we forge our relationships, which deepen our connection with children and increases their emotional intelligence, right? So let's start with part one. So one place where Fred Rogers can really inspire us is the way that he would approach conflict head on, right? And he would approach it, remember, considering how they can understand our language, how they can understand the context with what's happening, right? And he wasn't afraid to talk about topics that were difficult, right? So think about topics that maybe you're hesitant to talk about, right? He spoke about hard things. He spoke about death. He spoke about divorce. He spoke about assassination. He spoke about and addressed racism in ways that children could understand. So think about, are there topics that you're hesitant to talk about? And that could be kind of an emotionally activating one. Is there something that you are hesitant to talk about because maybe you think that's not really for us to talk about at school, that's a conversation for at home? Okay. And maybe there are, but what can you do in school, in your classroom, to address some of that information that they may be seeking from us? Because remember, we're one of their important adults that they could come to. We are their resource. We're one of their resources. So how can we bridge how they can get that information and how much information and how we can deliver that information in a way that is appropriate, that is age appropriate, right? So consider that. Are you hesitant to talk about divorce, about death? Take a look at the books in your classroom library. What have you rotated in and out, right? Are there books? Books are great ways to begin conversations about big topics and some topics that could be hard to have conversations about. But that's one tool that we can use to go ahead to help children understand what's happening in the world around them, to address what their curiosities are. Yeah. Okay, so approach conflict head on. That which can be talked about can be understood, right? Okay, next, foster acceptance. That's another place and another way where he he inspired us. Pardon my finger there. I think my camera was okay. There we go. It's all better. All right. So in his television show, the content that he created, he showed, talked, and read about a variety of people and circumstances and topics, right? There are people that can be our friends who move from here to there in a different way, right? So maybe you have somebody that you know, or you see somebody in the community that is using a wheelchair or a walker or crutches. There's an acceptance to that when you can understand, ah, okay, their legs work differently than mine. So that chair helps them move from here to there. Okay. I'm thinking about a time a little while back where I was working with a school, and it was during the summer program, and we had a kind of a collaboration relationship with the Center for Medically Fragile Children here in Portland, Oregon. And I had a friend there who was an activity therapist, and during a conversation, we were lamenting like, oh, I wish that we could come together more to help children on, from their program and our program, deepen and become more accepting and understanding and learn from each other, right? So we created a time where they brought some children over to us. We had a big gymnasium, and we were going to do some sort of experience together. And I'm thinking of that activity therapist. Her name was Janet Hanoa, brilliant woman. And yeah, she had a friend who was in a wheelchair that had a communication device, right? So our children came, and they were joining us in the gym, and they were outside the gym and hadn't gone in yet. And there were some children who were taken aback because they had never seen a child in a wheelchair. And this particular wheelchair was really big, and it was, electric, and it needed to be for lots of reasons. And on that wheelchair was a tray, and on that tray was this machine, the communication device. And there were some curiosities. Some children were really curious about it and came really close, and some hung back for a little bit of time, got really close to their important adults because they just didn't know. It's like, what is this? I don't know what this is. So during that time, Janet had knelt down, and she said, come, I'd like for you to meet my friend Ian. Ian needs this chair to move from place to place. His legs work differently than yours. And you know what else? Ian loves SpongeBob. Did you know? And this is a time when everybody was loving SpongeBob. Who likes SpongeBob? And some children were raising their hand. Yeah, Ian does too. Look, he's got, look at all these stickers of SpongeBob on his table. Come take a look. How many do you see? Bridging that and forming that connection, right? Now, Ian needs a chair to move from here to there. And get this, he also communicates and talks to us in a way that's different than the way that we talk to each other. Look, this is how it goes. And so she showed how Ian uses his communication device to say hello, or to say, are you ready to play? And the more she showed that connection, and that, oh, we're similar, and we both like SpongeBob, we both like to wear stripes, we both like SpongeBob, the children came closer and closer, right? So as we go into the gym, and we're playing with a parachute, and throughout the time she would point out, look, Ian has to do it differently, but still likes to play with the parachute. So I think about that when we come to this section here about fostering acceptance, right? So showing and talking about, reading about a variety of different people and circumstances and topics. What are the different ways that families can be made up? How can families look different? How can people look different? How can people and different abilities or opinions? How can we be different and still be friends? I bet you have some books in your library that highlight this. And if you don't, go get some. Books are a great way to begin to have this conversation, and you can have the conversation about the differences and the acceptance that we can have with each other in our community, in our classroom. Another way that he inspired us is to listen more, right? The importance and the power of embracing silence, right? That engaged pause. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been in the position where I felt like I had to fill up that silence when there was a question or a curiosity or a big emotion. I felt like, oh, I'm the adult. I need to fix it. I need to explain the heck out of it all because it's a teachable moment. Who's said that to themselves? Yes. Okay. Be aware of the power of embracing silence and noticing, right? Let's look at that tree. And I don't have to use every time we look at a tree to talk about the parts of a tree or talk about photosynthesis. We can first just go, look at that tree. Quiet. Let those ideas and that experience be experienced by the child without having to process all the words and all the information that's coming in. There's absolutely a place and a time to talk about the parts of a tree and to talk about photosynthesis. Absolutely. But when we get to this piece about listening more and embracing the silence, that's an example that comes to my mind of how many times throughout the day can we just pause and embrace the silence of, let's experience this together without talking it to pieces. When there's a big emotion, pause, let the experience of that emotion happen, right? And that arc of feeling a big emotion and then the emotion, right, regulates itself, right? So often don't we just use so many words that aren't necessary, right? This also carries into our emotional intelligence as adults going forward, right? So yes, approach conflict head on, foster acceptance, and listen more. So think about times when maybe you just wanted a friend to listen more instead of jumping into helping us fix it. Yeah. It's powerful. And then engaged pause sends the message of, I'm here. We don't have to talk all about it. And we can be quiet for a beat or two or more. Okay, so listen more. Another way that he inspired us is to expect mistakes, right? The idea of being friendly with error, right? So we made a mistake. Okay, now what? What happens next? This is also a piece that can that informs our relationship with each other and the other adults in the lives of children. We're human and we're going to make mistakes. So what do we do past that? How do we respond when we make a mistake or when our colleague makes a mistake, right? We can be friendly with error, encourage growth, yes, and consider, what is the need and what is the lacking skill? I'm coming back to Ross Greene again, right? Okay, so here are some ways that we can be inspired by his work. So I'd like to invite another pause to encourage you to do some reflection and think about which of those reminders that we just spoke about are places where you'd like to grow. And we'll go back here. I'll show them to you again. Approaching conflict head on, fostering acceptance, listening more, and expecting mistakes. So of those four, which ones are ones that remind you, okay, there's a place where I could grow? And write down what you intend to do to grow in that area. So I'll pause and invite you to pause and come on back when you're ready. Okay, now we're back. Take a deep breath. We'll carry on. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about feelings. We can't talk about Mr. Rogers without talking about feelings, right? So Fred Rogers said, whatever is mentionable can be more manageable, right? This reminds me of a time when I worked with teenagers in an inpatient hospital setting. Gosh, back in the day in Atlanta, right? So it was a hospitalized setting, and in this community of teens, there was individual therapy and group therapy that happened, every day. There was something like that happening. And I remember during a group therapy session, and this is, I wasn't the lead in this group therapy. It was the psychiatrist who was leading this group. And I remember a time when a young woman was telling a story, remembering something from her past, and her feelings were really becoming activated. So she was crying and she was really feeling big emotions in that moment. And I can remember that the other adult um, telling her to be quiet and that we weren't going to talk about that. Now, without giving you like the full context, that memory in that moment reminded me, I was reminded of that moment when I was thinking, and when I hear Fred Rogers say, whatever is mentionable can be more manageable, right? So when those big feelings come up, and even if they're big and they're enormous, and we might feel activated ourselves. Okay. As the important adult, what are we doing to manage our own feelings so that we can help children manage their feelings, right? What we can speak about, what we can mention, what we can talk about can be more manageable for the child and for us too. But what is our hesitancy? What makes us stop and pause? Are there times when that silence, remember the embraced silence, can be so powerful when we are with that feeling without having to talk it to pieces, right? That's different from not mentioning it, right? Shushing, and we're not going to talk about that, is the unmentionable. But we can recognize it, and in our recognition of its existence, send the message that we can manage this, right? We can mention it, we can feel it, we can experience it. Therefore, we can manage it, right? It sends the message that children aren't alone in this. And through that arc of feeling it, managing it, increases the confidence that, okay, that was hard. And okay, I managed it. We're okay. I'm okay. I thought I was going to be devastated for forever, but that was yesterday and today is better, right? So we can give children that experience of what we can mention, we can manage. Okay. He also talked about our relationships with others. So in being inspired by that, we can, think about in the neighborhood, everyone is welcomed and valued, right? In the neighborhood of make believe, or in Mr. Rogers' content, everyone was welcome, everyone was valued. How can we do that in our own classroom? Is everyone welcomed? Is everyone valued? How do we show that? Right? So I would encourage you to, if you want to pause or make a mental note, to think about in my classroom, is everybody welcomed and valued? Are there any barriers that maybe I'm not aware of that I can ask for help, right? How can I increase the feeling of welcome and being valued with my children and with the families in my community, right? That could be a much bigger conversation that I encourage you to have with your colleagues, right? What can you do to make families and children feel more welcome and valued? And are you hitting the mark? Is there some unhidden, not unhidden, but hidden bias or some barriers that exist for others feeling welcome and valued? Now, the next bit, Mr. Rogers helped us appreciate and respect others. So when we've done the work to check our own biases, to take a look at our processes and the physical environment itself and our relationships with others, we can notice, do I appreciate and do I have true respect for others? Do I have appreciation and respect for every child in my classroom, for every colleague in your community, right? And sometimes that could be a hard one because we might think to themselves, yeah, well, everybody except that one person don't really appreciate, don't really respect. and we're human, and that could be true. Can we find something that we do appreciate, that we do respect of that person, and build on that? And that's a deeper conversation to have on your own with your closest colleagues about that. Another thing is, he showed us, is the power of compassion, right? When we are present and we show true compassion to another person, that deepens our relationship, that deepens that feeling of trust, and helps that person become the greatest expression of themselves, which in turn helps our community be the fullest expression of themselves. And it could begin with compassion from I care about you, right? I think I made a mention of that at the beginning of the 1 minute meditation, the 1 minute experience where we think about the people who showed us compassion coming up and how powerful that can be. When we think of those people, we might get feelings and we might even get misty eyed, like I did. And maybe you do. All right, he also inspired us to talk honestly about difficult subjects, right? So he didn't shy away from the idea of divorce or even assassination during the time when that happened in our history. He talked about death and talked honestly and openly about anything. So think about the ways, because children, if they haven't already, there will be a child who will ask you a really hard question, right? And may have overheard something on the news and want to know about it. Because remember, you're their important person, you know everything. So they're going to ask you. So what does it mean when somebody calls somebody a fill in the blank? That's a good question. That's a good question is a great phrase to use to help you get your thoughts together. Another phrase is, that's an interesting question. I want to think about that for a little bit and I'll answer you after lunch, or let's go have snack and let's think about it. And then we can talk about it. Sometimes, this has happened where we might be taken off guard when someone asks us about something that to us in that moment might be shocking or surprising, and we don't have the answer for it. But we can always say, that's a really interesting question. I want to think about that and I'll get back with you. Don't forget to get back with them. Okay. Even if the getting back is, I want to think about that some more. Let's talk about that tomorrow. But talking honestly and openly about difficult subjects is something that is so important for us to be able to do with our children in our care. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about another thing that Fred Rogers inspired us to do. Now, many of his television shows tapped into what children were curious about. What were they interested? How do balls get made? Who made this golf ball? Who made this basketball? Who made this soccer ball? Who made crayons? How do they do that? Right? I knew a child once who was very fascinated about airplanes, wanted to know all there was to know about airplanes, and knew a lot more than I did, in fact. And he wanted to know more about that. So we figured out, okay, are there books about how airplanes are made, the parts of airplanes, the different types of airplanes? How do airplanes work? Let's meet somebody who flies an airplane, right? So when you think about what your children are curious about, how can you help them learn more about that thing, right? How do you make crayons? How do you make balls? So you can pause here and you can go to YouTube and find out Fred Rogers, how to make crayons. And you'll find the bit from his show where he took the camera into a crayon making machine factory, how crayons are made or how basketballs are made, right? It's so fascinating. I recommend the crayon making one. It's really cool. Okay, carrying on. So think about what are your children right now currently interested about? There was a time there children were really interested in those flat, those flat glass pieces that you can get from like a bag of them from the dollar store. They were really fascinated by them and the different colors and, sorting them and trying to stack them and trading them and all that kind of thing. So when children show us that there's an interest, we think to ourselves as educators, here's an opportunity. So let's talk about what is glass? How do they make glass? How do they make those little flat glass pieces? That's fascinating. Let's learn more about it. So let's think about, what are your children interested in knowing more about? So if you want to pause and write some of those things down, and then have a really fun time getting creative on how can you help them know more about that, right? Maybe you make language cards about the different kinds of airplanes. Maybe you have a poster or books about the different kinds of dinosaurs or different kind of balls that can be used on a playground. What are they interested in? How can you bring more of that information into their experience in your classroom? Okay, next, being ready for new experiences. Okay, there will be a time when there are children in your classroom who may be going to the barber or to get a haircut for the very first time. Or it may be that they're going to the doctor and they think they're going to get a shot, or they're nervous about getting a shot, right? Or it's a new doctor, or they're moving from your classroom to another person's classroom in just a few weeks, or they're moving from your school to another school, or they're moving from one house to another, right? There are all sorts of new experiences that our children experience because they're young. So a lot of experiences are going to be brand new. It'll be the first time. So Fred Rogers role modeled for us how to help children get ready for that, right? We want to share what they can expect. Like, what will happen when you're going to the barber or going to get your hair cut? What will happen, right? When you're going to the dentist, what can you expect, right? So share what to expect and reassure, like you're going to the doctor, and reassure your favorite adult, your important person will be there with you. If you have questions, this is a person you can ask. So offer that reassurance of what could happen and what they might be curious about that might make them nervous or excited. What is it that they're feeling, right? As you're sharing what to expect, reassure when they have feelings of nervousness or trepidation, something like that. Prepare them to meet and trust the people who care for them, the dentist, the doctor, the barber. They want to know, is it going to hurt? They want to know, am I going to be safe? And often they look to us for that reassurance. So we can be helpful and help them be ready for new experiences. Now, it's interesting, in this area, there's an opportunity to invite special guests to come and share, right? Like maybe there's a dentist or a dental hygienist or a dental student or somebody who could come and talk about what to expect when you go to the dentist for the first time, or what kinds of scissors are used at the barber or at where you get your hair cut, right? Remind your children that you don't have hair cutting scissors in your classroom. Those are special scissors. They're called they're shears, and we don't have scissors to cut hair in this classroom. I say that because that's a conversation I had to have with some children when there was a flurry of children cutting their own hair. Does anybody ever happen? Does that happen to you? And you had to explain, oh yeah, these scissors are for paper. There are different ones for hair. Okay, silly. Okay, so reassuring children, will it hurt? What to expect? Prepare them to know who they can trust. Who are the adults that they can trust, and who are the people that care for them and that they can trust. Okay, pause. Deep breath. Okay. Now we're going to shift a little and talk a little bit about advocacy, right? And his fierce advocacy for children throughout his career and work with children, right? So the idea of wonder and the idea of silence. Yeah. So Fred Rogers said in a statement to, I believe this one was with Congress, but he was very concerned that our society is more concerned with information rather than wonder, with noise rather than silence, right? So all of you early childhood educators out there, you probably are like, yes, of course, right? When we create a space where children can wonder and be curious about, like, that's a sweet spot, am I right? We prepare the space, maybe we ask a few questions, and then we get out of the way so that the children can activate that wonder, right? And activate that curiosity. That's such a sweet spot in a classroom. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. He also talked about, here, the noise rather than silence, right? We can pause before we have an answer. We can pause before we don't have an answer. And we share, that's a really interesting question. What do you think? Right? So we can quiet the noise and offer that time for children to process what they know, what they think, and what they're beginning to believe and understand. That comes from a gift of quiet and a gift of time. Now, does that mean all of our classrooms need to be quiet with no noise? There definitely is beauty in a good dance party, in playing our instruments, in being noisy. There are times for that, absolutely. But when we place so much importance on that, we miss that opportunity and that power when we offer moments of silence and a pause, right? That's something that I think about Fred Rogers when I show up as a teacher, that I pause before I dive in with information or a quick fix, or this is how you do it, right? He showed us about deep respect. And he said, it is my conviction that the youth who are in revolt are being revolted by our failure to know who they really are. Whoa. Deep, huh? If you need to pause and think about that a minute, go ahead. He goes on to say that they are tired. Children are tired. Youth are tired of being enrolled, assigned, programmed, graded, and molded from without. It's a person's creativity which allows him to make something of himself. It is this natural human creativity for which I have such deep respect. It is this creativity which must be fostered far beyond the 5-year-olds. So the work that we do with young children to foster that creativity, to allow space and permission and invitation for that creativity, is a skill that they will take with them beyond our classroom, beyond our school, into their teenage years, into their adulthood, and beyond. Right? I think we're all in agreement that the ability to be creative and to problem solve is a skill that is necessary, well, always, but especially necessary in the coming years, right? As our young children get older, that ability to think creatively and to think with consideration of others is something that they can learn in our classroom. Powerful, right? Our work is absolutely necessary. Okay, so let's take a moment and pause and write. So you've seen and heard the words from Fred Rogers in his advocacy of the children and his understanding and belief of the importance of respect for children, right? So let's pause a second and think about yourself and how and where can and do you already advocate for children, right? Sometimes that advocacy can be when you assist a conflict between two children. You can advocate for both children by being a part of that mediation, right? You can also advocate for children on a larger scale, right? Can you take a look at your guidance and discipline policy of your school? What about your admissions policy? Where can you be an advocate in your classroom, your school program, in your community, in your state, in your nation? So, how and where can you do that? How and where do you already do that? So, this is a pause and write. And when you're finished, come on back. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the letters, all the letters that Fred Rogers got. So this is a picture of a book that you can probably find at your library. It's called Dear Mr. Rogers. Does it ever rain in your neighborhood? Yes. So check it out. You can get it from your library. But let's talk about and read some of the letters that Mr. Rogers got from children. Now, it is said that he answered every letter. Can you imagine? At the beginning of his show, I believe I read that it was on Sundays or something like that, he would take the time to handwrite responses to every letter. Can you imagine? And it started out as, maybe 10, 15, and then they begin to grow because children and adults would write in to Mr. Rogers. And he considered that a really important thing to do, to respond. Right. I have a good friend, Aubrey, who got a letter back from Mr. Rogers. Can you believe that? Well, I can. But she wrote him a letter and he wrote her back. That letter from Mr. Rogers is in a frame hanging in her apartment, as you can imagine. So think about the time and the intent behind that. Now, eventually, he had to have a team help him with responding to those. But he had a team that was under direct supervision and guidance from him on how to answer them, right? So, they learned Freddish, and they learned about the emotional intelligence of children, and they learned about all of that we've talked about so far. Okay, so let's take a look at a few. So here's one. Dear Mr. Rogers, today my dog died. I was very sad. He will always be in our hearts. This afternoon we had a little funeral. Love, Ethel. So imagine the child's feelings. Look at all the tears along the side. So what a very vulnerable thing for this child to do, to send this letter to him. And Mr. Rogers, of course, replied. Another letter he received, there are hundreds and hundreds of them, right? But here's just a few. So here's one. Hi, Mr. Rogers. I watch you on TV all the time. I like the Mr. McFeely's Cow. I like King Friday, Handyman, X, Henrietta on Make Believe. I like Trolley too. Here is a pictures of me. Look at him. Hi, Trolley. His little arm is waving. It's precious. All right. So fan letters, he got those too. So here's an example of a response. One, look at this beautiful handwriting, but he responds like this. Dear Tim, the answer to your request is yes, a resounding yes. Now, before we finish reading this letter, imagine what was the letter that Tim wrote to him. Just imagine what that might be. But here's his response. I will be proud of you. I am proud of you. I have been proud of you since first we met. I'm deeply touched that you would offer so much of yourself to me. And he carries on, and look forward to knowing all that you would care to share in the future. Nothing you could tell me could change my yes for you. Please remember that. I wonder if you realize how special you really are. Your place in this life is unique, absolutely unique. I feel blessed to be one of your friends. Only God can arrange such mutually trusting relationships, for sure. For sure. Yes, Tim. Yes. Love, Fred. Okay, first of all, wouldn't you like to get a letter like this? Yes, and yes. Okay, so here's what I invite you to do. we're going to pause, and I invite you to write a letter to Fred Rogers. In your workbook, there's a whole page that you can write. What would you write if you could write a letter to Fred Rogers? And then write his response. So on the next page in your workbook, there's a space to write a letter from Fred Rogers back to you. So that ought to be fun. Okay, so take a moment. It's going to take more than a moment. So this will be a longer pause. So pause, write your letter to Fred Rogers, then write his response to your letter, right? Remember Fredish. Remember all you've learned about how he has inspired us, and that will inform what his response would be back to you. So that's a lot of writing. So pause, do that thing, and come on back when you're finished. Okay, we're back. Okay, I'm just wondering how you're feeling, because that could be kind of activating of some big emotions. So if you need to take some time to just think about, okay, who am I going to talk with about this? Who are your important people? Who are your important adults that you could reach out to talk through that experience if you had some big emotions that came up, or to share what Fred Rogers said back to you? I would be so curious about that. Feel free to share, to meet with me if you want. Okay, deep breath. Let's carry on. Now we've talked about all of his inspiration. We've talked about all we've learned. And now we've talked about the letters. And now it's time to talk about the music. So there are plenty of records out there that you can get from your library, or I'm sure on Amazon or at a record store. Yes, there are still record stores out there. They exist. So you could find records or recordings of the music from Fred Rogers all over the place, and there are countless covers of his work and of his songs. Now, get this: one of the fun facts, spoiler, is that he was an accomplished musician and a composer of music. I mean, he was really talented. So he knew music theory, and he knew how to make good music that wasn't okay, you guys know the music I'm talking about. That's like Baby Shark. Okay. It has its place. But he created music that had a complexity and a simplicity to it that children really connected with, and the adults really connected with as well. Okay. His lyrics to the music were so incredibly powerful and iconic, right? So what I invite you to do, right? So for copyright reasons, I can't, play those for you right now. But in your workbook, there are several links to different recordings and different people doing covers of his music. And there are plenty to find of him singing his own music as well. So I invite you to pause right now, go to that page, click on those links, and listen to that music. I encourage you to listen to the melodies, listen to the lyrics. What is the message? So remember, we talked about how he would edit the script. Same thing with the music, right? So if he had a song that he was going to sing during the show, a great deal of time and effort went into the composition and the lyrics of that. Now, soon he eventually began to work with a composer, right, who would help with that, right, under his guidance, of course, right. So go check it out, listen, get inspired, and come on back. Okay, now that you're back, you probably listened to some of these songs. What do you do with the mad that you feel? It's such a good feeling to know you're alive, such a happy feeling. You're growing inside. And when you wake up ready to say, I think it make it a snappy new day. Okay, I think we ought to bring back snappy days. I'm entering that into my vocabulary today. All right, something that's snappy. Okay, so in his music, well, look, Won't You Be My Neighbor is the classic one that most everybody has heard, right? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. I mean, the melody and the rhythm of his lyrics, oh, spot on. And then it's you I like, right? It's not the things you wear, it's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like. The way you are right now, the way down deep inside you, not the things that hide you, not your toys, they're just beside you, but it's you I like. Every part of you, your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new. I hope that you'll remember, even when you're feeling blue, that it's you I like. What? Okay, let's just give like a moment of for that. So these songs were written for children, but as adults, let's just give ourselves permission to be on the receiving end of these words and the receiving end of this music as well, because, we're human. Okay, so those are just a few of my favorite ones. Okay, deep breath. All right, here we are. We're rounding up and rounding out our webinar time together with some fun facts. So here we go. Did you know that when he was a child, he was bullied? He had children who were not very kind to him and were consistently not kind. And there was a power imbalance, right? And there was an intention to harm, right? Those are the ingredients of bullying, right? So he experienced that as a child. You know that influenced and informed the work that he did with children, yeah? Next, he was an ordained minister. He was trained as someone to lead a church and to create sermons and to preach in a church. He responded to all of his fan mail. We talked about that already. And animals loved him. You can always tell a good person when animals love them, right? Our dogs and our cats, they let us know. Oh, so there was a bit where he went to visit Coco, which is a gorilla that they were teaching sign language. And so lots of different people would go and visit Coco, like Robin Williams went to visit and other people went to visit. And Mr. Rogers went to visit and Coco gave him a hug. Imagine sitting there with an enormous gorilla and they put their arm around you to hug you. Would you feel a little bit nervous? I probably would. You could go and search and find that a link to that video. It's really precious. Okay, next, he was an accomplished musician. Talked about that. And his interest in television and creating programming that was of high quality came from his own disdain, right? He saw the medium and thought, this could be done better. And then he realized, if it's not me, then who? Now, another fun fact is that his mom knitted all of his sweaters. Isn't that so great? And it began with, it'd have a cardigan sweater with buttons, right? And if you've seen the show, you know that when he comes in, it's an elaborate choreography, for him to enter singing the song, come down the steps, take off his blazer and put on a sweater. I mean, it's complex. If you're looking at it as a choreographer, like I was looking at it like, okay, because I'm a choreographer, and I realized, okay, he's got to have his shoes off and the other ones on and tied by the end of the song. I'm sure they rehearsed that quite a bit. Well, it turns out, so as he was buttoning his sweater, one time the buttons were off. You know how we've buttoned up a sweater where it was just, off like that. And he had to unbutton and rebutton, right? So I'm sure a nod to friendly with error. We know the production crew said, oh no, we can't have that. So they switched out the buttons for zippers. Then with the lights and the cameras, the zipper, the shiny part of the zipper would reflect the light. So they had to paint the zipper the color of his sweater. Interesting, right? Production crews, they're pretty amazing. Next, He changed from his regular outdoor shoes to sneakers so that when he would run from being in front of the camera around to where he would be, Daniel the tiger or the other puppets that he would be the voice for, he had to put on sneakers because his shoes made that tick, 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 tick sound. You could hear him running. The camera would catch that sound. So it's like, okay, Fred, you can't wear those shoes. They're too loud. So you got to wear tennis shoes. So that's how the production made a shift for him changing shoes at the very beginning. Okay, so the last fun fact that I want to share is 143. So do you know what that means? Does anybody know what that means? So 143 is a phrase or a collection of numbers that he would use in communication with people, and it stood for I love you. So 143 is the number of letters in I love you. Get it? I is one, love is LOVEUYO. Get it? Right. And recently, I didn't know this, but I had a friend tell me that 143 was his ideal body weight because he was shorter, kind of a slender person. He would swim every day and consistently weighed 143 pounds for most of his entire life. Can you imagine? That takes some dedication. Okay, so now you know what 143 means. Okay, so now I invite you to put everything down. Put your pencil down, uncross your legs, get in a comfortable position because we're going to do a thing. We're going to do the gift of 1 minute. Right, so here's what he said about 1 minute. He said, and I'm paraphrasing a little here, let's take 1 minute of silence to remember all who have helped you become who you are today. Some are here now, some are far away, some may have passed. But wherever they are, if they have loved you, encouraged you, wanted the best for you, they're right inside yourself right now. So let's devote right now, let's devote some thought to them. Let's take 1 minute in honor of those who have cared for you all along the way. 1 silent minute. So what I'll do is I'll watch the clock. And when I say go, we'll go for 1 minute of silence. And I invite you to think about those people and go. Okay, that's 1 minute. So I hope if there's any way possible that you can reach out to those people in whatever way feels right, to let them know that you did this experience and let them know that they came to your mind as someone who cared for you, who encouraged you, who helped you be the person that you are today. And I also encourage you to do this experience with your team. So think about, is there an opportunity that you can do this with your colleagues? What about your family, next family dinner that you have? To take 1 silent minute to consider and devote some thought to the people that showed up for us. Okay. So if you need to dry your tears, it's okay. Come on back. Now's the goal setting part of the webinar. Now, what is one thing that you plan to do in the coming weeks? So write that down. What's your plan? What's your goal based on something that you learned or you thought about or you considered during this webinar? Write it down. And who is the person who's going to help you do that? Who's going to help you remember, right? You got to tell somebody, hey, in a week, check on me about the thing that I was going to do, right? That's one way that we can help each other be accountable. So if you need to take some time to write that down, now is the time to do it, and come on back when you're finished. So here are some books that went into the research and the development of this class for you. Among other content, lots of rewatching episodes of the show. Yeah. So here's a book, The House of Make-Believe, Children's Play and the Developing Imagination by Singer and Singer. When you wonder, you are learning. I 100% recommend that book. So good, Bayer and Rudinsky. Next, The World According to Mr. Rogers, Important Things to Remember. That's kind of a fun one to give as a gift to people and give to yourself. Kindness and Wonder, Why Mr. Rogers Matters Now More Than Ever, Gavin Edwards. And then The Visual History, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. This is the book that started it all for me. My daughters gave it to me as a Christmas present years ago because they knew I loved Mr. Rogers. And as I read it, I just got inspired. So here's the class that I made just for you. So other books available from Amy Williams, social stories that are written into a book format. So wow, that's a big emotion that helps us navigate and help children navigate and understand and regulate when those big emotions happen. Hey Friend, Want to Play helps children understand and know how to ask a friend to play, right? It's similar to consent. What is that anyway? How do you ask for consent? How do you hear an enthusiastic yes? What is a clear, firm no? And what do you do when that happens, right? So those two, and then rude, mean, and bully, what is that? That stars the upstander, right? So rude, mean, and bully, what is that? It helps children understand the difference between rude, when you don't mean to hurt somebody, but you do by accident. Mean, when you kind of meant to hurt them. And then bullying, which is when you mean to hurt them, the same person over and over again, and there's a power imbalance. But man, bullying is complicated. And then what can you do when you see rude or mean or bullying happening? I can stand up and be an upstander, or I can stand by and not do anything. How can we help children understand and know what the upstander is, what the importance of the upstander? Even you might feel nervous being an upstander. So upstander, near and dear to my heart. So if you're interested in these and you want these, go to my website. There's a button that says books. Click on that. It'll take you right to the Amazon site, or you can reach out to me directly and I can get you an author copy as well. Just let me know. So here's how to find me and how to reach out to me on Instagram and Facebook at Amy Williams Academy. My email, amywilliamsacademy@gmail.com, and the website is amywilliamsacademy.com. So thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy that you had this time, that we had this time together. All right. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.